long ago, and it happened far away. The moral of the story has been lost until today. Although we shouldn't let the past complicate the now, we wrap a stack of artifacts that help us show us how. Whatnot hopes and soggy dreams become who I am today. I'm feeling more alive in more important ways. Lost all ability to think for myself. I put it on the table, then you help yourself. Wow, wow. This place stinks of corruption. Shots fired confirm my assumption. Everyone is evil in their own special way. This advice I'm giving you today.
Welcome everybody, good to be with you today. If we want to understand the great age of heroes in ancient Greece, the Mycenaean period, where among other things the Trojan War is set. The Trojan War, if it really happened, is set around the year 1250 BC. If we want to understand this era that so influenced all the stories that we're told later and handed down to us, well, I've got good news for you and bad news for you. Good news is the Mycenaeans were literate. They left behind writing, lots of writing. Even better news, we can read that writing. Not you and me, but we as in people can read and translate Mycenaean writing. Why? Well, we figured out that their alphabet, which is called Linear B, is just Greek with a different alphabet. And people can speak Greek. All right? So we can communicate. We can hear the voice of the Mycenaeans. There's bad news too. The bad news is all the writing they left us sounds like this. This is an example of a typical Mycenaean tablet.
I agree.
Somebody got 19.2 liters of olives. Somebody got 9.6 liters of olives. Wall builders got 1.2 liters of barley, and there were 20 men. Sawyers, what's a sawyer? I only asked because I just learned this when I was in grad school.
Don't they like till crops and stuff like that?
No, that makes it's a sower. Sawyer is one who saws. A guy who cuts stuff is a sawyer. Yes. And sawyers, isn't this fascinating? Sawyers in the Mycenaean period got 1.2 liters of barley. Mycenaeans wrote, and they used their writing for receipts, record keeping. Every so often, and yes, for a real historian, there's important information even here. And some of these records give us the names of particular government officials, which tells us how their society was structured. Some of the records are from temples, where it will tell you that the barley and olives and goats and stuff were sacrificed to particular gods, which tells us about their religion. And we can see the familiar god names pop up in the Mycenaean era, so Zeus and Poseidon and Athena and all them, so that's important. What we don't have is any literature. Based on the evidence we have, it seems that the Mycenaeans did not have literature. They did not use writing to tell stories, only for receipts. Well, if I wanted to understand our culture, how else could I understand U.S. American culture if I didn't know about the Civil War, or Donald Trump, or Star Wars, or Jesus, or September 11th, or The Simpsons, Marvel, Me Too, The Office, Instagram, Harry Potter, COVID, Black Lives Matter, or TikTok? How well would I understand the United States if I didn't know the stories we tell? If I just had receipts?
Terribly?
Terribly, yeah. Vlad pumped 20 gallons of gas. And for me, I've got my most recent receipt, I guess, is the $40 I spent door dashing McDonald's this weekend, to my great shame. And maybe that tells you a little bit about the United States of America. But if you don't have the stories of a people, you don't have that people. You don't know that deeply. So from the fact that the Mycenaeans left us only receipts, are we to assume that they didn't tell stories? Brad says, no, why? He says, if you didn't hear me, he says he's pretty sure every culture tells stories. Yeah. If the Mycenaeans didn't tell stories, they'd be the only people ever not to have stories. So if they're telling stories but they're not writing down, what are they using to transmit those stories and pass those stories down?
Orator.
Orator. Matthew wins the prize. Yes. So the Mycenaean cultural heritage is passed down through orator. I'm handing the story down to you and you hand it on to him. And what happens to a story when it's handed on this way? Slightly tweaked and modified, yes. And Gracie?
And like he said, it changes over time. Like we said before, when you have a small fish that a fisherman caught, and he's bragging about it, and it slowly kind of evolves into a shark.
Yeah, yeah. So it slightly tweaked each telling, and after enough tellings, that's not so slight anymore. After enough tellings, a lot of it will be unrecognizable. That's how we end up with rhinos with guns in our stories. So, if you had lived in ancient Greece or ancient Rome, you would have thought that the stories we have of the Age of Heroes, especially Homer and Homer's Iliad, which is our primary source for the Trojan War, you would have thought that that was just straight up history. That is how it happened. Not only straight up history, but sacred history. History that was revealed not only by Homer, but revealed to Homer from the muses, the goddesses of inspiration. If you'd have lived 200 and 300 years ago, you would have assumed that. Thank you, Jada. Jada's pointing out that I'm old. That's very helpful, especially right now. Thank you. If you lived 200 or 300 years ago, you would have assumed that all the stories of the heroic age were straight up fiction, that they never happened, that there were no Mycenaeans, that ancient Greek civilization began about 700 BC, that they were hunter-gatherers, Stone Age, cavemen, right up until that point. Now, thanks to Heinrich Schliemann and his successors in archaeology, we have a more nuanced view of this period. This is the period where Homer and Hesiod appear. They provide us the first examples of literature from Greece, and therefore from Europe, and therefore from the West. They emerge within decades of the rediscovery and reinvention of writing. So a few days ago I talked about this, how amazing it is that 15, 20, 30 years after the alphabet is invented, you have Homer. Homer comes first, then Hesiod, although they probably lived at the same time. So you would think of it as Hesiod was a young man while Homer was an old man, but they're not separated by hundreds of years.
Just a small overlap.
What's that?
Just a small.
Just a small overlap, yeah. So they're contemporaries, maybe the same way we're contemporaries. We're a different generation, but it's not like Confucius and I are a different generation. It's not that. I read this book over the summer, June, and I practically drooled over this book. Troy and Homer by Joachim Latatz. Good for you. There's a free copy on Schoology for you. All right, just go to Materials Assorted Resources. Joachim Latatz argues compellingly, in my opinion, that what we have in Homer preserves some legitimate memory of what was going on centuries before in the Mycenaean period. That the Trojan War, not in all the details in Homer, but an actual conflict between the Mycenaean Greeks and Troy, leading to the destruction of Troy, almost certainly happened. I would not have said that before June. I would have said, all we know is that Troy was real and it was destroyed. He has convinced me that it was probably destroyed in a war with Greece. He demonstrates to my satisfaction that many of the stories that Homer tells originated hundreds of years before Homer. One of the ways, and in this class we're not going to get into all the details of his evidence, check it out for yourself, but one of the things he does is he uses Homer's language as evidence. So, Homer writes in a very strict poetic meter, and he never breaks that meter. He never breaks that meter except for when he does. So it's always baffled those few. Just look on Power School C. When he breaks that meter, Latats argues that. So the meter is based on syllables, all right? Stressed syllables and unstressed syllables. And I'm going to get more specific a little later in the lecture. When Homer breaks the pattern, Latats argues it's because the word Homer's using, if you went 400 or 500 years in the past, the word Homer's using was pronounced differently in the Mycenaean period. And Homer is preserving a phrase that has come down to him for 400, 500, 600 years. That Homer is preserving real memory, although real memory that has gone through stages and stages and stages of orature, so the fish often becomes the shark in those situations. Fascinating. I suggest you check it out. All right. So the primary means of both entertainment and the passing down of knowledge in Greece in the Archaic period is the epic poem. Another thing Latats successfully argues for compellingly is that the art form of epic poetry itself dates at least back to the Mycenaean period. Yes?
Is this where theater begins to emerge from?
Theater will be a little bit, theater will emerge from epic poetry, but it's going to emerge a little bit later. So we've still got a good 200 years, maybe 300 years between Homer and the emergence of theater. So theater is really a hallmark of the classical period, and Homer is at the dawn of the Archaic period. He sort of marks that transition from Dark Age to Archaic. But a lot of the subject matter of drama is going to be pulled out of Homer and the other poets.
What I was wondering, if it was kind of derived from.
Absolutely. And what Latats shows in Homer and Troy is that the art form of epic poetry goes all the way back to the Mycenaean period. So what Homer's doing, other than writing it down, when Homer's performing these grand epic poems that we're about to talk about, he is exercising an art form that has been handed down to him for centuries, which means he's providing us a window into the distant past, a window that peers through that dark age when there's no writing. Because the only way for this form of art to be passed down from generation to generation is right on through that dark age, which means, because we asked when we talked about the dark age, I said, how much technology does it take to tell stories? We said none. So all the things that are lost in the dark age do not include epic poetry. And even in the deep poverty and illiteracy, the bards are continuing to pluck their lyres and sing their songs. Okay, so we've got literary and, I won't read this word for word, literary and folk epics. Literary epics are epics that are born as written documents. Folk epics are epics that belong to the people. They're oral in their composition, and they're not attributable to a single author. Homer's epics are actually usually categorized as folk epics. When we talk Homer specifically in a couple weeks, you'll see there's a lot of controversy over him. There is no consensus about anything about Homer, even whether he existed. or whether there's the same author of Iliad and Odyssey. I happen to be of the opinion that yes, he did exist, and there is a single author of Iliad and Odyssey, and it's Homer, but that opinion is not universally held. But Homer is not inventing, and I'm of the opinion that he puts a major creative stamp of his own on the story, but he's not inventing the story from whole cloth. Right? It's a story that he sort of steps into, that has been passed down probably from the time of the actual Trojan War in the 1200s BC. So his are categorized as folk epics, even though they're the beginning of the literary tradition. Here's some of the hallmarks some of the hallmarks of epic poetry. An epic poetry has an epic hero. An epic focuses on the adventures of a larger-than-life main character. And that hero is strong and brave and loyal and virtuous. And what the epic hero does is the epic hero embodies the values of the culture that produced the epic. So that means the epic hero is not necessarily nice. If the values of the culture that produced the epic are not values that we would consider nice today, epic hero is not going to be nice. An epic hero might massacre an entire village and be praised for it in an epic poem, because those would have been the values of the time. The epic hero is often semi-divine, part human, part divine.
Like a demigod?
Like a demigod, yes. So it may be the case, as in Achilles, when we read the Iliad, Achilles' mother is a goddess and his father's a dude. So he has superpowers, but he's also mortal. Epic hero possesses superhuman strength, craftiness, confidence. The gods, or whatever the spiritual beings of the culture are, interact with the epic hero. Some to assist him, some to harm him and trip him up. And especially in the Greek epics, it's a hymn. We don't have epic heroines, and that's the female. We don't have heroine the drug either, but we don't have epic heroines, female heroes in Greek poetry, because that's not the value of the culture. Ancient Greece is absolutely a male-dominated culture. The epic hero overcomes many perilous, dangerous situations, and he does so through the extraordinary traits that he has, and by embodying the traits that are valued in a culture, the epic hero is sort of a stand-in for the culture. Right? When a great example from our own day, even though it's not epic poetry, is Captain America. And especially Captain America when the comics were first being published in the 1940s during World War I. That is, it's actually not even great writing because it's so unsubtle. When Captain America wins, we win. Captain America represents us all. The epic hero represents all of us in our culture. Epics are full of archetypes, themes and characters that resonate across time and across cultures, that can be recognized in nearly any time and place, and get the same reaction from the hearer or the reader in just about any place. So the brave hero and the sea monster, the dragon, a contest between suitors competing for the hand of a woman they love. Evil temptress. There's an unfortunate archetype that's been with us through a lot of literature. We'll look at that a little more in a couple days. But the woman as the source of all that is dark and evil in the world, and how the woman's cunning mind is a trap that the man must try to avoid, especially in Greek literature. Again, that's the values of the culture, very male-dominated and misogynistic culture. It's a massive conflict. Right? So, Luke Skywalker goes to the store and buys a new pair of boots. That's not epic. That's not going to happen in an epic form. Luke Skywalker faces down his father, lightsaber to lightsaber, in a battle to the death for the freedom of the galaxy and the restoration of the Republic. That's the kind of conflict that an epic is going to cover. It's not about little piddly things. Right? It's not. Anybody watch Seinfeld anymore? I know it's been off the air more than 20 years. Nobody watches Seinfeld anymore. Oh, well, the Seinfeld, it was known while it was on in the 90s. It's a show about nothing. Epic is just the opposite. Epic is not about nothing. Major conflicts. Epic settings. Epics often take us to fantastic or exotic lands. It could be magical realms. It could be spiritual realms, the land of the dead, or it could be how we imagine places far away are. Especially medieval European epics often send their heroes on journeys not only to places like the moon or heaven and hell, but to faraway countries. So places like China or India will pop up in the medieval epics, but those were not places where it was very likely any medieval European would ever travel. So what you see is their imagined perception of what those places would be like, full of exotic monsters. And when you think about the old trope of the old map, and there's an X at the end of the map, and it says, "Beyond here there be dragons." That's how epics treat the foreign and unknown. Yes, ma'am.
Where did Beowulf come from?
Oh, Grendel's. I don't know. What was Grendel at? Underworld of some sort. So Beowulf is pre-Christian, but it's had a Christianizing editor, so I haven't read it in like 20 years. If I get to do classical studies too, Beowulf's on the list. But off the top of my head, I'm not prepared to answer that. I'm sorry, just the worst teacher ever, right? Right? Okay. Thank you, Jada.
Jada had to give you the reassurance.
Yes, absolutely. The heroic quest, we hinted at this already. The success of the hero is the success of our people in these stories. So we root for the hero to be successful in the quest. It could be to save a princess. It could be to acquire a magical item. It could be to defeat an enemy in war. But the hero's success or failure is our success or failure. The hero is a stand-in for us all, frequently interacting with the divine. Gods and goddesses will intervene both to help and hinder the hero. Epics focus on universal themes that matter to everyone. Things like courage, loyalty, beauty, the fate of the nation, life and death, homecoming. And you can expect there to be more than one theme per epic, especially one like Homer. So Homer's epics are hundreds of pages. Hesiod writes about 40 pages in the theogony, a little less in the translation I was looking at. And by the way, there is, between the two, there is no contest to who is the superior author. Hesiod's work is valuable because of its age and because of its content. It's valuable as the oldest source for the origin myths, oldest written source for Greek origin myths. As far as talent as a writer, Homer is the 1992 Chicago Bulls, and Hesiod is like the Four Corners Middle School basketball played at gym class. Now, it's not that he's bad, but there is no comparison. Alexandria is not impressed by my simile. All right, so here's a simile. Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Do they follow a similar grammatical structure as like what we do nowadays, like with the rising action, the climax, and the...
Yes, so he asks if it follows a similar dramatic structure to the rising action, the climax. Yes, because that model, we get that from Aristotle's Poetics. And Aristotle, when Aristotle wrote his Poetics, he was not dictating, he was analyzing what was actually done in the stories. So yes.
I didn't know we got that from them too.
Yeah, that's Aristotle's Poetics. We didn't talk poetics during humanities much because I was more interested in metaphysics. Remember, he did everything except for the side. Some other elements of epics. So epics are full of similes. What's a simile? Or what's a simile like?
Kind of like,
What's a simile like?
yeah, kind of a comparison between one thing and another.
You gonna film everybody but the person talking, maybe? Gracie's talking, I better get the back of Leah's head. What's a simile?
The first thing that came to my mind is like when little kids try to write for the first time, so they're like, his eyes sparkled blue like the ocean, and kind of comparing something to another.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So it's, because the epic is describing things that most of us don't experience. Most of us have never gone to battle with a dragon. Or there's one point in Iliad, Achilles fights a river. He fights a river. Okay? Yes, it's coming up. He fights a river. Now, most of us can't imagine what it would be like to fight me, river. So, what the simile does is the simile makes constant comparisons to things that are much more familiar in our life. So, Matthew's questions are like gnats buzzing in my ear. Yes, Matthew.
Well, your teaching's like a hornet in the ear. Like, please stop.
Your grades like this roll of duct tape. Go ahead.
So is he like physically battling the river, or is he like just trying to get across it?
No, they're fighting.
So they wage war
Fight
on
me.
each other.
You and me, River. Yeah, you'll see. You'll see. You'll see. A couple other elements. Epics usually begin with an invocation. That is calling on some power outside myself to inspire me to sing or write this poem well. For the Greeks and the Romans, those powers are going to be the muses, goddesses of inspiration that dance before the throne of Zeus and are the source of our creativity. Yes?
They'd be minor goddesses then, wouldn't they? But
Yes,
not, like,
yes.
The main.
Yes, no, they're not in the top 12, sure, but they're important to poets. And they also, their existence means that for a Greek, hearing Homer, hearing Hesiod, the people in the audience believe that this is divinely revealed. That Homer's not just telling you something he came up with, but that through Homer, these goddesses are revealing that which is true. So it's not just story, it's sacred story. It's scripture of a sort. And anyone who's a creator, so whether you're an artist or a writer, poet, sculptor, musician, you've probably experienced those moments when you're creating and it doesn't feel like it's coming from you. It feels like you're not aware of the step-by-step process your brain is going through. Instead, it's like the inspiration comes from outside of you, and the story or the image or the song takes out a life of its own. It's just in here waiting to come out, and you're just the middleman in the process. Is the feeling? Well, the Greeks were human. They had that feeling. Only for them, they interpreted it literally. Like, yes, this is coming from without me. It's coming from these muses. That's the source of our word music in English, by the way. And it's coming from the muses. Jada knows the cringiness that is on its way. Epics also often begin in media res. That's in the middle of things, in the middle of the story. They drop you into the action already in progress and then catch you up by use of flashbacks. It's like Star Wars beginning with episode 4. Okay. Iliad, page 1, or first there's the invocation, but scene 1 of the Iliad is not the beginning of the Trojan War. Iliad comes in 9 years into the war. Iliad ends before the war is over. It's just a moment in the middle, and that's an epic convention. The epics are usually set to music. and sung by the poet. It would be a mistake to imagine some sort of complex melody like an opera, so the singing is more like a rap or a chant. And they're very strictly structured according to poetic meter that they're will not often hesitate from. Why do you think that is? What do you think is the value, if I'm an epic poet, what is the value of me using a meter that I stick to consistently, music, and a musical way of speaking?
It might be able to catch on more accurately with literature, and also as it is developing more things like stage plays and stuff, it can help you keep the beat of as it's going. You can rhyme words which might not normally rhyme by separating the syllables.
Ah, okay. Lee. Oh, I'm done talking. No, she had her hand up. Look.
It brings more emphasis to the writing in general.
Brings more emphasis to the writing in general, Spencer says. Leah?
It brings more of a flow to the way of the writing, and it's also a way to put like a tone and or emphasis on what they're trying to say.
Mm-hmm. And Gracie?
And all of those combine to make sure that it like keeps the listener's attention.
Uh-huh.
Because if they're just monotone and flat and don't add any inflection, they're not gonna like actually pay attention to what you're saying.
Absolutely. Let me illustrate this principle.
Oh my God! Turn around.
Anybody remember this?
Cover your eyes.
Oh, no,
Cover your eyes.
Has everybody seen the show, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
I still watch it.
Yeah, so it aired for 6 seasons starting in 1990. I'm pretty sure that the last time I saw this show was 1992. And yet, I stand before you this day and I say to you that this is a story all about how my life got turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air. In West Philadelphia, born and raised, on the playground is where I spent most of my days, chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all, shooting some b-ball outside of the school, when a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got in one little fight, my mom got scared. She said, "You're moving with your auntie and uncle Bel-Air." I whistled for a cab, and when it came near, the license plate said fresh and it had dice in the mirror. If anything, I could say that this cab was rare, but I thought, nah, forget it. You're home to Bel-Air. I pulled up to the house about 7 or 8, and I yelled to the cab, "You're home, smell you later." I looked at my kingdom. I was finally there to sit on my throne as a prince of Bel-Air. Haven't seen it in 30 years. Haven't seen it in but it's catchy, and so it has sort of burned itself into my memory. See, the epic poets have memorized massive amounts of text, and at the same time they are editing that text on their feet. Remember a few days ago I said, you know, if you're a storyteller in Greece and I see Matthew's here and he's getting into it, well, now I'm going to work him into the story. Or if I see, so if there were a modern day Homer and he saw a bunch of people with red hats that say "Make America Great Again" on it, he would then probably work in Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden and make them foolish characters, or just the opposite. If he saw someone with a Biden hat, he would work in Donald Trump and make him a foolish or evil character. The epic poet, the closest modern parallel, I think, is a freestyle rapper, only the epic poet is MC and DJ at the same time. Because the epic poet is remixing the story and ad-libbing the story within this massive memorized structure. That's where these, we didn't mention them, but the epithets in the poem. You'll see the same descriptive phrases used over and over again in Homer to describe the same people or places. So the sea is almost always the wine-dark sea. Achilles is almost always swift-footed Achilles. Why? A, for his audience, even a great storyteller is dealing with people with a human attention span. And we zone out, because it would probably take about 24 hours to perform the Iliad. So we zone, and probably not straight, it'll be about several nights, of course, of a festival or something. But when people are zoned out, wait, what is he talking about? Swift-footed. Oh, okay, this is an Achilles part. Awesome, I'm back on board. And it also helps the poet to keep on track. Okay, so here to help us imagine what a performance by Homer would actually have been like. Here's Eminem performing from the Iliad in the original Greek. Oh, wait.
Each of these cats, they're getting big now.
You don't remember the Iliad?
I don't know what's going to happen. You ready? You know what to do? DJ, kick that shit.
Into it as Eminem's audience is there. That's how the story keeps growing. He sees who's getting into it and what, so everybody's booing, everybody's pissed when a certain character comes in. Well, here comes a dragon going to eat that character. All right? And now because Gracie was at the performance where the dragon ate Manny, when she tells the story, the dragon eats Manny. And all of a sudden, a couple generations later, bye-bye Manny. Manny's not part of the story anymore. But Aiden's riding the dragon. So now Aiden riding the dragon is part of the story, and the story grows because the audience is part of it. The most common poetic meter in Greek and Latin poetry is something called dactylic hexameter. Come over here for a second, Liam, just to get this little visual on screen. So a hexameter has 6 parts, and they're called feet or dactyls. All right? And they don't work well in English because Greek and Latin both, the words flow more smoothly and they do more with the way words are accented in Greek and Latin. English is a lot more choppy, sort of kick you in the shins kind of language. But the way it works is each dactyl is usually, if they're 3 syllables, a long syllable, which means the accented syllable, and 2 short syllables. You can substitute 2 long syllables for the dactyl, though. That fits too, and long means accented. So, down in a deep, dark well sat an old cow munching a beanstalk is dactylic hexameter. Now, because English isn't structured that way, you really have to force a hexameter in English. It would be very difficult to write something like the Iliad in English in dactylic hexameter. It would be hard to communicate meaningfully. These restraints would be constrictive to an English speaker, but they were empowering to Homer and Hesiod. So, speaking of Hesiod, Hesiod comes second, but we're going to take him first. Why? Because Hesiod's subject matter is more fundamental. Hesiod's talking about the beginning of the universe and the origins of the gods. So starting tomorrow, we'll be covering Hesiod's Theogony. Matthew.
Do we know that where the dactylic hexameter came from? Like, was it a creation of the poets, or was it like an existing
So we don't know where it came from, but Latats argues that it goes back at least to the Mycenaean period. The Greeks were not the first to communicate in epics, all right? Because the Greeks are a relatively young civilization compared to the Near Eastern and Middle Eastern civilizations. The oldest written story we have in the world is the Epic of Gilgamesh from the Sumerians. I was going to open with that this year. I realized I didn't have time for non-Greek or Roman stuff in the main curriculum. If they give me classical studies too, Epic of Gilgamesh will probably be on the list next year. So my seniors, all you have to do is fail to graduate, and then maybe you can join me next year for Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, folks, so tomorrow we go back to the very beginning of the universe with Hesiod. Talk to you then. Liam, you want to take a little selfie, show them who they're working with?
Like just around the class or?
What the hell kind of selfie would that be if it's around the class? What's the first syllable of selfie, son? Give me the
camera.
This is Liam, ladies and gentlemen.